A gusty Guy Fawkes night and a typhoon heading towards Vietnam. They're the main two topics to discuss in this week's Met Office Deep Dive. Welcome along. My name's Alex Deakin, broadcasting to you from Met Office HQ in Exeter in Devon. Welcome along. If this is your first deep dive, you're in for a treat. If you're a veteran, then don't forget to share the love. Let other Met heads know that we do this every Tuesday. 20 minutes, maybe half an hour if you're lucky, of meteorological mayhem. We'll delve into what's going on with the weather across the UK, and this week we'll look a little further afield too. We love reading your questions and your comments, so please pile them in, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up button as well and give us a like on there also. And we'll try and answer as many of those questions as we can, maybe in a future deep dive, or maybe during our live Weather Studio Live, which we do every Friday at 12:15. And it's a special one this week. I can say no more, but you won't want to miss it. Keep your comments coming in and make sure you're giving us a follow. Right, okay, what are we talking about this week? Well, as I said, a bit of Guy Fawkes weather, bonfire night weather, and a bit about a typhoon. But first of all, just a quick mention for something else you want to follow us on, as well as YouTube. You will be wanting to give us a follow on Spotify. It's relatively new that we're on Spotify, but all of our longer form videos are on there. So if you like the deep dive and you're a subscriber to Spotify, then give us a listen on there. You can watch as well. The 10-day trends will be on there as well, and our weekend forecast and our week ahead. All of our long form videos are on Spotify. So go and give that a view. Bonfire weather in just a moment, but first of all, something rather dull. October, to be exact. These are the sunshine stats for October, or rather the lack of sunshine stats, standing out like a beacon. Just parts of northern Scotland there, a blob of yellow, a little fried egg across northern Scotland. That's the only spot that saw more sunshine than average. A few white patches across northeast England, eastern Scotland, where the sunshine amount was close to average, but for most of us it was a grey October. We had that anticyclonic gloom for a good chunk of the month. We also had a named storm, and the dullest areas, the darkest grey there, Northern Ireland, parts of West Wales, between 30 and 50%. In fact, I think it was the second dullest on record October for Wales and Northern Ireland. For the UK as a whole, only 1960 and 1968 have been duller than the October we have just had. So it was the third dullest on record. Records for sunshine go back to 1910. So pretty remarkable. Also followed on from 7 consecutive months of sunnier than average weather, as Aidan talked about in a previous deep dive. So yes, after a string of sunny months, we've actually had a very dull October. There's a Met Office blog on that if you want to find out more about the dull October that we have just had. But the deep dive is more about looking forward than looking back. So what is going to happen to our weather? Well, let's take a look at the satellite imagery over the past few days. It kind of tells the story quite nicely. Big swirl of cloud there from just before Halloween, and that's been sweeping its way in from the Atlantic. That's the way our weather patterns have been over recent days. We've seen a shift. We've had the anticyclonic gloom with high pressure through a good chunk of October, but now we've opened the door to westerly winds, swirls of cloud barreling in from the Atlantic. Over the past couple of days, though, notice a slight shift. If I just rewind it back to there, instead of the westerly winds, you can just almost see that the flow is becoming more southwesterly. We've seen the wind switching direction, more of a southwesterly, and that is going to continue over the next few days. In fact, we're going to shift the winds around more, and we'll see more of a southerly in terms of our wind direction over the next couple of days. Now, when the wind's coming up from the south, of course, that's going to bring warmer air, because that's where the warmer weather is. So this is the bigger picture when we take off the satellites and look at the jet stream, that fast-moving ribbon of air high up in the atmosphere. And it's a big old dip in the jet stream out to the west. This big trough generating low pressure systems and sending them our way. We've got this big dip, and if we play through the next 3 or 4 days, it's kind of a repeating cycle. Notice out here there is another one of those troughs, another dip here, generating another area of low pressure. This one will eventually take over, but in the shorter term, this one is kind of dipping down and kind of being cut off. It's getting squeezed and it's just forming almost back in on itself and letting these areas of low pressure sit here and gradually drift further north. So our air is coming up from the south, bringing the moisture up from the Bay of Biscay, bringing low pressure systems, bringing weather fronts, and that is bringing outbreaks of rain, particularly to western parts of the UK. By the time we get to the end of Thursday, notice that dip in the jet stream, that little trough has pretty much been cut off, squeezed completely, and we're almost back to square one with that second trough driving in. But everything's just been shifted a little bit further westwards, and that will continue as we head into the weekend and into next week. We'll have this kind of repeating pattern, but the trough, instead of being closer to the UK, more out here, keeping the low pressure systems further away and allowing higher pressure to influence things from the east. So that's how we go into the weekend and into the early part of next week, with this scrap going on between low pressure to the west and high pressure to the east, with a southerly winds perhaps swinging more into a southeasterly. But in the shorter term, what we do have is wet weather, low pressure down to the south, generated by this first trough, weather fronts pumping up from the south. And if we put the winds on at the surface and take the high level winds off, you can see those winds, the isobars squeeging together, bringing those brisk southerly winds. And they're generating quite a bit of mountain waves where the air bounces over the hills. And we can see that quite nicely on the satellite image from yesterday and again from today. So this is the picture from yesterday, quite a high resolution picture of the satellite image yesterday afternoon. You can see these ripples across the south. You can see where the winds are coming, bouncing up over the hills, and they're forming waves. So the air is forced over the mountain, comes down the other side, and it creates this wave and this little ripple. It creates pockets of cloud as the air is rising and crests. You get an area of cloud, and then it sinks, but it overshoots and it bounces back up and creates another wave. So you get these beautiful little ripples. Now they look pretty from the satellite image above, but they can be very dangerous because they can create large amounts of turbulence depending on how stable the air is and how much of a drop you get, how rapidly the air descends. For aircraft, they can be quite dangerous things as they form to the lee of mountains. So this was yesterday's satellite picture. Today's satellite picture isn't quite as pretty, but it does kind of show them forming again. This is from this morning. It's not quite a high resolution. It's been a bit slow today, the old touchscreen, isn't it? Come on, keep up. You can see them there if you squint a little bit. There are the little ripples within it, but also at a slightly different angle because the winds have changed direction. The winds have backed, and now those ripples are pointing, because the ripples, the waves in the cloud run perpendicular to the way the winds are going. So the mountains are obviously in different shapes, and you need those mountains to create them in the first place. There's generally quite a bit more cloud around as well. So it's not as clear cut, but they are in that slightly different orientation because the winds have backed. And that will continue. Those winds will continue to move around more to the south, and then perhaps even in from the southeast over the next day or so. So if you look at what the weather's doing for the next couple of days, you can see that we will see, there's the jet stream, the isobars tightly packed across the country, rain coming up through the rest of today and into tomorrow. Further pulses of rain coming up. Let's put it on just the UK shot, so show the UK. That's Wednesday. Let's just rewind for today because we do have warnings in place as we go through the next I've gone back far enough there. There we go. You can see pulses of rain through this afternoon and this evening for Wales and southwest England. We do have Met Office yellow warnings in place. Those waves, the winds coming up straight from the south. So over the moors in the southwest, the hills of South Wales, the air is forced up. Not only do we get those waves, that bouncing, but it also pushes the air up and generates more rain. So we call it orographic rainfall. So the rain's really going to be enhanced over the hills and mountains of South Wales and southwest England as we go through the next well, 12 to 24 hours. So quite a lot of wet weather to come in this area. We're going to see more in Cumbria, of course, as well, where we've had quite a lot of heavy rain. But because they get a bit more shelter here from a southerly, it won't be quite as bad, be in a slightly different orientation to the heavy rain that we've seen over the past couple of days. We have seen 200 millimetres, I think even more than 300 millimetres over some of the hills of Cumbria of late. So any more rainfall not welcome here. But you can see in the next, 20 hours or so, more rain to come for particularly western areas, and then tomorrow that pulse of rain will be more across Scotland. Again, there you can see the pulse over the southern uplands and the higher ground bearing the brunt of that heavy rain as we see those winds coming up from the south pushed up over the mountains, and that generates more rainfall on the mountains. And then on the lee of the mountains, you get the waving effects of those winds. So let's have a look at a bit more detail as we go through Wednesday, because a lot of people will be heading out tomorrow evening. If we just kind of pause it there, you can see there's a front bringing a band of thicker rain across parts of Scotland. So for bonfire night, what time do people head out? Bonfire night, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock? Let's pause it at 8 o'clock there. Actually, likely to be quite wet across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland with that weather front sitting in place. But for a good part of England and Wales, and possibly Northern Ireland, the rain may be out of the way. Yes, I'd like to see a few showers here and there, but actually a good part of England and Wales probably going to be dry through the evening time for the bonfire. Now, bonfires will be pretty wet, particularly in western areas from the rainfall over the next 24 hours. But certainly for bonfire night, if you're heading out, it is likely to be largely dry across England and Wales. Fairly cloudy, a bit dank, and it's certainly going to be mild because those winds are coming up from the south. They're going to bring very mild air. Let's look at the temperatures for the next few days, and we'll see just how temperatures are going to be significantly above average. These are the daytime temperatures. If it brightens up, we could easily get to 17, maybe 18 degrees. These are above average for the time of year right across the board. But let's look at the nighttime temperatures, because they're even more impressive in terms of being above average. Look at these numbers. Maybe some towns and cities staying in the teens Wednesday night, Thursday night. Again, parts of northern Scotland there just poking out with some colder air, perhaps lingering. But even here, by Thursday, as that warmer air is pushed further north, temperatures could stay in double figures. So getting pretty mild. Well, it's been quite mild this week, but staying quite mild, particularly by night. Signs of it turning perhaps a little cooler by Friday, but even these numbers are above average. And these kind of numbers for Thursday would be fairly typical for daytime maxes, if not slightly above the average for the daytime max, and that's the nighttime minimum. So temperatures aren't going to drop, so you will not necessarily need your hat and your scarf this bonfire night if you are heading out, because it will be on the mild side. As we've seen, it could be quite wet across parts of Scotland, but elsewhere, decent chance that it's going to be dry. But I did mention those winds, and they're still coming up from the south, which is why it's quite mild. But they're also going to be a little bit gusty in places. Now, this is the projected wind gusts for 6 o'clock on the night of the 5th, showing where we could see some gusty conditions. I've just noticed this pattern. You've got that ripple effect that we saw earlier from the mountain waves. The wind's coming up from the south, and so you're getting these lines where the air is bouncing over higher ground, bouncing over the land, and creating these ripples. You can see them there. Let's zoom in a little bit, and you can actually see a bit closer there. That's southeast England, that's the south coast of England. So lively gusts over the channel, but then you get this kind of rippling effect as the winds swing round, and you get the South Downs, the Chilterns, creating these tiny little ripples. Now, these winds are not particularly strong. The gusts are 25 to 30 knots, so 28 to 35 miles an hour, perhaps up to 35 knots maybe in places. So we're not going to be issuing a warning for that, but just quite noticeable that some areas will have those gusty conditions. And it could be very gusty in one place, say along this line here, but 20 miles further away, you don't have that gustiness because the winds aren't bouncing down, they're going back up again here. So quite interesting to see the variation in wind speeds across the country, and that's quite a factor if you are going out to a bonfire. You want to be on the south side of that bonfire because it will be blowing the flames and blowing the smoke around quite a bit there. Notice the stronger gusts there through the Irish Sea, again with those southerly winds coming over the Welsh mountains, those mountains having a bigger effect, creating some gust, and of course you're over the sea there as well, so you've got less a frictional factor. But yeah, just quite interesting there to see how those winds will be changing and gusting as they bounce up from the south during bonfire nights. And interesting as we get into the weekend as well, as the winds fall lighter, then that could generate some more mist and fog. Obviously, the 5th of November is bonfire night, but we know that there's many firework displays that go on into the weekend. So that is something that could be a factor as we head into the weekend, because the winds are likely to be easing off a bit. I've lost my graphics there. There we go. The winds are likely to be easing off a little bit, and with all the extra pollutants from bonfires and from fireworks, it increases the chance of fog. So actually, this time of year is generally the foggiest because of those extra pollutants in the air. So as the winds fall lighter, an increased chance of fog into the weekend, when of course firework displays will be continuing. But we're unlikely to see much in the way of mist and fog the morning after this bonfire, because the winds are remaining fairly gusty, and that mixes the air up and it doesn't allow the fog patches to form. So yeah, quite a bit of interesting meteorology going on this Guy Fawkes night. Okay, let's take a look now at what's going on elsewhere around the world. I mentioned at the start there is a typhoon. It's just clearing away from the Philippines, and it made landfall. This is a tweet from our Met Office Storms account run by Julian Hemming, friend of the show. He's been on regularly, expert in all things to do with typhoons and hurricanes, tropical expert when it comes to meteorology. He runs this account. If you're on Twitter, X, follow Met Office Storms, posting about how it made landfall across the Philippines. You can just about see it in there. And where's it going to go next? Well, it's just coming out the other side of the Philippines, or it was this morning. And this is the projection from the JMA, the Japanese Meteorological Agency, and it crossed the Philippines. The Philippines is quite a fragmented landmass, obviously lots of islands involved, so it didn't break up as storms would do if they hit a larger landmass. These kind of storms, typhoons, hurricanes, of course, fueled by the warm seas, but it did break up a little bit as it crossed the land. So it hit as, I believe, equivalent category 2 hurricane, weakened a little bit, but it is expected to move out into open waters again. The South China Sea is quite warm at the moment, so it will be moving out over these warmer waters, unaffected by land. It's expected to intensify somewhat, and again slam into Vietnam. And this could cause some further problems. The wind strengths as it makes landfall Thursday likely to be about 110, maybe 115 miles an hour, so on the cusp of what would be between a category 2 and a category 3 storm. That is pretty powerful, and it's also going to drop quite a lot of rainfall in this part of the world as well, and generate quite a big storm surge. Let's take a look at how we're expecting it to move. Don't need a jet stream for this. Let's have a look at its path. So here we have it. So just clearing away from the Philippines in the next, right now, really, to be fair. It's pushing out into the South China Sea, and it will intensify a little bit as it crosses and as it heads towards Vietnam during tomorrow, and then expected to have its outer fingers of the rain and the cloud reaching the coast of Vietnam as we go through Thursday, and then into Thursday night and Friday morning their time. That's when some of the worst impacts are likely to be, as that storm, let's zoom in a little bit, arrives on the shore there of Vietnam, 9 o'clock Thursday evening our time, so that'll be Friday morning their time as it comes in here. And still quite a lively storm, as I said. Could easily still have winds gusting over 110 miles an hour, so that is going to bring some problems with in terms of its rain, in terms of its wind strength. But it's also going to generate quite a big storm surge, maybe as much as 3-meter storm surge on its northern flank. So with these storms, the winds drawing in around the low pressure, pushing up. It's going to, the low itself will lift the sea level a little bit, and then you're going to get that pushing in of the winds as they come around, and that is going to generate quite a significant storm surge, maybe as much as 3-meter storm surge. That could cause some flooding in its own right. And then we've got the rainfall as well. If you look at some of the rainfall, how that's going to move in. If we head across the world again to Vietnam, see some pretty heavy rain, monsoon rains there in Myanmar. But over the next, let's fast forward, you can see there's the rainfall coming in there. There's Vietnam. As that storm system moves in, we are going to see some pretty heavy rain during the course of the night, Thursday night into Friday morning UK time before it moves inland. Then it will weaken, as these storms do. They lose their fuel from the warm seas, but still dropping quite a bit of rain in this area. We could see 100, 200 millimeters of rainfall at low levels. Quite widely in this part of the world, maybe as much as 400 millimeters over the hills, and it could be more than that. The models have been struggling with this storm a little bit. So that part of Vietnam only gets about 500 millimeters of rain through November, so we could be seeing a month's worth of rain in just a few days from this storm system as it moves in. So it could be causing some significant problems. As I talked about, the wind, that storm surge, and the heavy rain. So it's a triple-edged sword, if you like, and they've already been suffering from flooding in this part of the world, across parts of Vietnam too. So this could be quite a significant storm system that hits over the rest of this week into the weekend. And then there is potentially another system behind that which also needs watching, because that is developing. Must have a word with Aidan about getting this. Why? It's gone back to the UK, hasn't it? Always goes back to the UK. It's the default position. But yeah, it'd be better if it had stayed where I was looking, wouldn't it? But you know, something to work on. So as Kalmaegi moves away, there is then this next system coming in, Tropical Depression B it is called at the moment, but this one has the potential to intensify further as we go into the weekend. Could well become another typhoon. Needs watching. Again, favourable conditions for that to develop as we go through the weekend and into next week. A lot of uncertainty about the track of this one. It could head into the Philippines. It could be curved further north. So far from certain about the path of that one, but it does need watching because it has the potential to develop into another very powerful typhoon in this part of the world. So again, something we'll be keeping an eye on. Met Office Storms and Julian will be keeping an eye on as well over the next few days. Right, let's get back to the UK, see what's going to happen for us. As I mentioned or hinted at over the course of the weekend, we are potentially seeing a bit of a switch around. If we fast forward to Saturday, by the time we get to Saturday, notice the isobars are opening up. So that's what I talk about with the lighter winds, potentially bringing some mistier mornings. A lot of moisture from the rainfall we've seen this week, so misty, murky conditions. There is a little low in there, which could generate a bit of rain. Notice how this trough in the jet stream has been squeezed, but it's still there before this one takes over and starts to slowly try and threaten weather fronts from the west. But high pressure is building, so we've got this scrap into the weekend. We're kind of stuck in the middle, probably with some moisture, so some outbreaks of showery rain and also the potential for some morning mist and fog as things turn a little bit cooler. But generally, it looks a bit drier. As we head into Sunday and into next week, we've lost that arm of the jet stream. This one is still out here, but it's much weaker and it's not really pushing this low in anymore. That's going to stick out to the west, allowing higher pressure to build in from the east, and we're going to have that battleground going on. It looks like this weather front will provide some rain in from the west during the course of Sunday. Let's show that on the UK scale. We will see some more rain returning from the west as that front pushes in by the time we get to Sunday, later on Sunday. And then we continue with the winds coming up from the south. So it is quite mild, but it's not as mild as it has been. What happens after that? Well, that's the big question, as always. And if we look at, that's not the right one, that's the one I want. If we look at the most likely weather patterns as we go into next week, there's a lot more red on the chart, which is slower moving weather systems often dominated by high pressure. So for the next couple of days, we've got the lows coming in from the south, the low tracking south, that's that pale blue colour, but then the reds take over as we go into the weekend, early part of next week. A lot of dominant red, Scandinavian high pressure sitting here. Take that rainfall off, got high pressure here into next week. That one, that's the right one. So high pressure here, the winds more coming in from the southeast. So we've got the winds at the moment coming from the southwest. They turn more to the south as we go through the middle of the week. May turn back a bit southwesterly for the weekend, but then into next week, more coming up from the southeast. Now, if this were a summer situation, we'd be looking at some really high temperatures with the air coming up from the south, Scandinavian high, low pressure out to the west, and we'd be looking at drawing up some very warm air from the near continent. If it were a winter situation, then we'd be talking about cold air coming in from the east, but we're not in either, really. The continent across Europe has started to cool down, so it's not as hot as it was over the summer, but it's far from cold at this time of year. So with these southeasterly winds, actually probably like to see temperatures close to average as we head into certainly the early to middle part of next week, with high pressure set to dominate up to the northeast. Then, well, it looks like high pressure, the darker reds take over, and high pressure is more likely to be sitting up somewhere towards the north of the UK. And in that setup, well, we do drag in more of an easterly wind. Now, that would allow it to turn a little bit colder, certainly across eastern areas with the breeze in from the sea. Whereas further west, those temperatures will probably still be close to average. And I think I can show you that if Aidan's funky new charts work, showing the potential temperature. If we look at the ensembles, when we run the models many times, you can get a trend for how the temperature may be changing over the coming days. Now this is, I picked this spot here, just to the west of Northern Ireland, and this is the temperature profile. And that's when you run the ensemble many times. Each of those green lines represents one of those model runs. Now you get a lot of noise after a while, but you can still see the signal. So you get that variation day and night. So you can see that day and night pattern. But also you can see generally temperatures, well, may dip off a little bit here. Generally speaking, you get more of a messy signal by the time you get to the middle part of next week. But if I switch this dot to where it's looking at somewhere near Norwich, then again, you've got that daily oscillation in the temperatures, but you can see quite clearly here more of a drop. There is a drop in the average temperatures. So we are going to see things cooling down. Whoops, what, very sensitive now, isn't it? You can see that drop in the temperatures further east as we're more likely to see the influence of the winds from the North Sea, and we are likely to see things cooling down. Still only nothing cold. It's just back closer to average across those eastern areas because at the moment it is exceptionally mild. But there is a definite trend there with those temperatures, certainly across the east. Further west, the message is a bit messier because low pressures could be edging in from the west, and generally the winds remain from the south or the southwest rather than from the east, as they're coming in from the east here. So yeah, quite interesting to see how that pans out if we see those temperatures dropping. But as I said, it doesn't look exceptionally cold. The continent isn't particularly cold at the moment. The North Sea isn't especially cold, just colder than it has been. Of course, if you're on the coast on the North Sea and the wind is coming in from the North Sea, it's going to feel pretty chilly, but actually those numbers won't be much away from the average for the time of year. I think that's probably about it from me for this week. Thank you very much for watching. As I said, if you've got any comments, questions, queries, do pop them in the chat. We do try and read them all. We do love all of your comments. And any suggestions for how we can improve our content, not just our deep dives, but anything to do with the Met Office content. Big shout out to Greg, who's been recording me today. Thank you very much for that, Greg. And do join us for the live on Friday, a very special one this Friday. What can I give you any secrets away? No, it'll just be a very special quiz. There might just be more than the normal number of presenters in. So yeah, tune in for that on Friday at 12:15. But from me, for now, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.